After trading Westbrook and George, OKC has now entered into a full rebuilding mode. In hindsight, they've actually been one of the most consistently successful teams in the past decade, though of course the lack of championship will always make it somewhat disappointing. In this video, I want to go over the Westbrook era in OKC, starting in the year 2016 when Kevin Durant left. We're going to look at the trades and signings that OKC did, why they did and didn't work. We're going to look at how Westbrook and his new teammates adjusted to playing with one another, and everything else to try and figure out why OKC failed to win a single playoff series these past 3 years. Just a side note, I'm currently on vacation and I didn't bring my camera with me, so you won't be seeing my beautiful face today. Apologies if that's what you were looking forward to. Before we get into it, a shout out to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's video. SeatGeek is the best way to buy tickets to sporting events, concerts, and well, anything else that requires tickets. The app is designed to make the process very simple for you, and it has a lot of features that make it unique. Within the app, many arenas and concert venues have previews of the seats, so you can get a sense of what your seat will look like before you actually have to buy it. If any of that sounds interesting to you, make sure to download the SeatGeek app right now. You can click the link in the description to do so, and when you end up buying your first ticket, use my promo code MDJ for $20 off of your first purchase. About a week before free agency began in the summer of 2016, the Thunder traded Serge Ibaka to the Orlando Magic in exchange for Victor Oladipo, Domantas Sabonis, and Ersan Ilyasova. The centerpiece of this move was getting Victor Oladipo. It was in response to what had happened in the playoffs when the Thunder blew a 3-1 lead to the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. In those last 3 games, Durant and Westbrook shot poorly, and without their 2 superstars making shots, OKC had basically no offense. They viewed Oladipo as someone who could provide the solution, someone who could fill that role better than Dion Waiters could, and with Steven Adams getting better every year, Ibaka was becoming less important. But then everything changed. Kevin Durant's departure in 2016 set OKC into a panic because they did not plan for it to happen. Durant announced his decision about 4 days after free agency began, which meant that many of the best free agents were already signed. And seeing that OKC was already pushed towards the cap, they couldn't do much either. They traded Ilyasova in a protected first for Jeremy Grant, which seems like a good move in a vacuum, but for OKC, it was questionable. More on this later. OKC then got Taj Gibson and Doug McDermott in exchange for Laverne, Anthony Morrow, and Cameron Payne. This was a trade that looked pretty great at the time and looks pretty good in hindsight, though not particularly impactful. The 2016-17 season was crazy. Westbrook went berserk, playing 81 games, averaging a triple-double with 31 points. In a close race between him and James Harden, he won MVP, although the Thunder won just 47 games and was the 6th seed in the West and lost in the first round. 2017 is also when I first started YouTube, and one of the earliest videos I ever made was in response to this, where I call triple-doubles the most overrated stat in basketball and why it's more of a psychological trick than anything. My point in this, oh my goodness, I look like a child. Anyways, my point in this video was that triple-doubles give off the illusion that 10 rebounds is significantly better than 9, whereas 11 rebounds is only slightly better than 10 rebounds. It's a psychological trick because we like whole numbers, like how batting .300 in baseball is seen as much better than batting .299. We're going to linger on this point because I think it's a big reason as to why OKC failed these last 3 years. In 2017, Westbrook was clearly chasing after individual glory, which is not entirely his fault. Because the media and fans give so much attention to a player achieving this very arbitrary goal of 10 rebounds and 10 assists, it was easy for Westbrook to become obsessed with this. Also, it felt very much like he was trying to prove something to the detriment of his team. Now, it is true that in the regular season and in the playoffs, OKC was significantly better with Westbrook on the floor than off the floor. This idea has been spun by people to defend Westbrook's historically high usage rate, something along the lines of, well, he had to do everything because they needed him to. I have 2 responses to this. The first would be to check out a video I made a while back called The Chamberlain Paradox, where I show how even if you're by far the best offensive player on the team, the most efficient scorer, which Westbrook was not, but even if you are, it can still be better for your team if you take less shots and do less on offense. My second response is that basketball isn't played like a video game, it's played by humans who need to feel comfortable. You can't just ask Oladipo to stand on the side and watch Westbrook take the ball every possession and then shove the ball in his hands and say, hey, Westbrook's on the bench now, go do something. There needs to be rhythm, there needs to be practice. Taking a step back, here is my thesis for this video. There are two major reasons why, in my mind, OKC failed to do anything in the playoffs these last 3 years. The first reason is Westbrook's difficult play style and his inability to adapt his game. The second major reason is the lack of shooting and quality role players. These two reasons feed into one another and make each other worse. Because OKC didn't surround Westbrook with the right players or with enough shooting, it aggravated Westbrook's bad shot selection, made him take more shots than he should have, and made him less trusting of his teammates. At the same time, Westbrook's play style makes it very difficult for OKC to get the right pieces to go around him. It demands very specific types of players because not everyone can play alongside him. Let's get back to the timeline for a second. After losing to the Rockets in the first round in the summer of 2017, OKC traded Oladipo and Sabonis for Paul George. At the time, this looked like a complete steal by OKC. In hindsight, it actually looks quite even, not because George wasn't as good, but because both Oladipo and Sabonis exceeded everyone's expectations. Then, right before the season started, OKC finalized a trade to get Carmelo Anthony in exchange for Enes Kanter and Doug McDermott. We laugh at it now, but there was a lot of excitement about this deal. The Thunder also signed Patrick Patterson to a 3-year $60 million deal, re-signing Andre Roberson to 3 years and $30, and then re-signing Westbrook to the 5-year $200 million Supermax. They also drafted Terrence Ferguson with the 21st pick. The 2017-18 season was the most disappointing of the 3 years because they failed everyone's expectations. Paul George seemed like a good enough fit alongside Westbrook, but Melo was a disaster on and off the court. Andre Roberson missed most of the season and all of the playoffs with an injury. OKC ended up winning 48 games, only one more than the previous year, and they were knocked out of the playoffs by the Utah Jazz, a series they were favored to win. OKC was ranked 24th in three-point percentage and 28th in assists per game. Again, we harken back to the two main reasons why OKC failed. Having Westbrook meant stagnated ball movement in the half court, especially when there was not enough shooting around. In the summer of 2018, OKC successfully re-signed Paul George, which was a big deal. Most people thought that he would leave for LA, but he stayed. They traded Melo for Dennis Schroeder, hoping to boost their bench. They re-signed Jeremy Grant to a 3-year $27 million deal. And in the 2018-19 season, we saw a major shift in the dynamic between Paul George and Westbrook, as George began taking over more and more of the scoring and offense, ending up with an MVP caliber season. All things considered, this looked like a step in the right direction, although inexplicably Westbrook's shooting efficiency continued to drop. He was never a good three-point shooter, but after shooting 34% in 2017, he ended up shooting 29% in 2019. His free throw shooting dropped even to 65%. Still, it did seem like Westbrook made a big effort to change the way he played. Andre Roberson remained out for the entire season, and though Terrence Ferguson began getting some quality minutes, guys like Abrines and Patterson completely dropped out of the rotation. The Thunder won 49 games and were eliminated by a short-handed Portland team in the first round. Alright, I'll be honest, I've spent enough time in this video and frankly enough time on my channel criticizing Westbrook. Instead, I will point out something else that contributed to the failures of these last 3 years for OKC. And that is that OKC's front office, Sam Presti if you will, did not go all in. Now, I'm just pointing this out. I'm not actually criticizing it for reasons that will become clear. But starting in 2019, trading Ilyasova for Jeremy Grant. Grant is clearly the younger, more valuable player with more potential, but OKC needed Ilyasova and his shooting more than they needed Grant. Andre Roberson is a fine player. If he can ever get healthy, he'll have a decent career, but he's an atrocious fit alongside Westbrook and OKC. Re-signing him for $10 million a year seemed like a long-term plan, because for $10 million a year, you definitely could have gotten a decent 3-and-D player that fit OKC better. And maybe that addition alone could have gotten OKC to the second round. Now, there is a balance to be struck here, because plenty of teams before have gone all in and failed. But to me, it seemed like OKC played these last 3 years too safe. You don't have to go full Pat Riley and trade away all your future first rounders the moment they become available, but you could have pushed harder. Now that they've entered rebuilding mode, OKC's probably happy that they didn't trade away a bunch of their future firsts, but again, there's a trade-off here. The trade-off being that your team wasn't as good as it could have been these last 3 years. Looking back, we can also see, again, just how important it is to have undervalued contracts in the NBA. I have an entire video explaining what I mean by undervalued contracts. The idea is that because teams have limited cap space and because most players are paid roughly what they're worth, in order to win a championship and be better than everyone else, you have to get players who outperform their salary. And quite frankly, these last 3 years, OKC had maybe one player that outperformed their salary, and that was Paul George last year, who you could argue was worth more than $30 million. But at, let's say, $40+ million per year, Westbrook is overpaid. Adams isn't worth more than $25 million. Schroeder is overpaid at $15 million. Carmelo was overpaid. Jeremy Grant was probably adequately paid at about $9 million. Patrick Patterson completely flopped at $5 million. With the slight exception of Terrence Ferguson, this past year, none of OKC's rookies or rookie contracts outperformed their salaries, and none of OKC's veteran minimum signings provided above minimum value. So is there a lesson to be learned from OKC's last 3 years? Maybe, maybe not. It's hard to blame OKC for not going all in, given that the team didn't seem like it was truly close to contending. Perhaps in 10 years, when OKC has done its full rebuild and won the championship with, I don't know, LeBron's son, who they drafted with one of the Clippers picks, maybe it will all seem worth it then. After all, the league goes on, teams rise and fall. As Robert Jordan likes to say, the wheel of time turns and ages come and pass. There are neither beginnings nor endings. Well, that's the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. Believe it or not, I am very excited to see Westbrook play in Houston. If anything, just to see whether or not the change of environment has an effect on him. I'm looking forward to a next season, and I will see you guys next video.